Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time.
It is good to be back. And today we are definitely heading into some truly turbulent waters.
We certainly are.
Hmm.
Usually on this show, we're talking about economics or housing or the intricacies of tech monopolies. Big impersonal systems.
Right, things you can kind of look at from a distance.
Exactly. But today, we are wading into waters that I think every single person listening has, well, nearly drowned in at some point.
Yeah.
We're not talking about politics in the traditional sense.
No.
We're talking about the text message that never comes, that limbo. We're talking about the situationship that drags on for 8 months without ever getting a label.
God, the situationship. It's a defining feature of modern life.
It is. We're talking about the sheer grinding exhaustion of modern romance.
The modern romantic landscape.
It is.
Yeah, it's a battlefield.
It really is. And the central question we're asking today is this. Why does modern love feel so uniquely difficult? Why do we feel like we are constantly failing at it?
And that question is key, because usually the answer we reach for is intensely personal.
Oh, always. Whether we're crying into a drink at brunch or just, staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, the answer we come up with is always about us.
Right. We follow the cultural script. We immediately tell ourselves, well, it's my childhood trauma.
It's my attachment style. I'm anxiously attached, they're avoidantly attached.
Or it's our subconscious fear of intimacy. Or,
Yeah.
we get even more basic. We think, I'm just not pretty enough or rich enough or interesting enough. We're told over and over again to just do the work.
You have to work on yourself. You have to love yourself first. It always goes back to the individual being somehow deficient.
Yes, the problem is located inside your own head.
Exactly. But today's deep dive is going to offer a completely counterintuitive answer, a radical answer, really.
So it is.
What if it isn't you? What if it's not your mother or your ex or your psyche? What if the reason love hurts so much today is because the institutional architecture of modern society?
That is the core argument of the book we are covering today, Why Love Hurts. A sociological explanation by the sociologist Eva Illouz. And her thesis is something that I think a lot of people just desperately need to hear. She argues that we need to stop looking at the psyche and start looking at the market, at the system itself.
I have to say, reading this book was a revelation for me. It was almost like a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. I spent so much time thinking, I just picked the wrong people, or that I have a broken picker.
And that's the learner perspective we all start with, right? We internalize the failure. That's what decades of psychology and self-help have trained us to do.
Of course.
But Illouz isn't a psychologist. She's a sociologist. So she looks at the structures markets, media, capitalism, technology, and how they have completely, and I mean completely, redesigned our emotional lives. She argues that our private misery is actually a public issue.
So the mission of this deep dive, then, is to shift our perspective, and hopefully yours listening, from that psychological view, which, it almost always leads to internal blame.
Always.
To a structural view. We want to unpack what she calls the great transformation of love. How we move from the era of moral courtship to what Illouz calls sexual fields.
It's a dense book, but it's incredibly important. It gives us a language for why ghosting happens, why commitment is so unbelievably hard to find, and why rejection today feels like a kind of death sentence.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's unpack this. To understand the mess we are in now, Illouz says we have to understand what we left behind. We have to look at the ecology of choice in, say, the 19th century, basically the Jane Austen world.
Right. And it's really important, before we dive in, that we're careful not to idealize that world.
Oh, for sure. It wasn't some romantic paradise.
No, absolutely not. Women had very few rights. Class mobility was pretty much non-existent. And if you were gay, you were completely excluded and erased. It was an incredibly rigid system.
But it was a system. It had rules.
It had clear rules. And in the 19th century, you didn't have dating in the way we think of it. You had courtship.
Okay, so what's the fundamental difference there? Because to my modern ears, courtship just sounds like, dating with your parents watching.
It was so much more than that. The difference really lies in the intent and the visibility. Courtship was a public, highly ritualized entry into marriage.
So not a private exploration of feelings.
Not at all. You didn't go out to a quiet dinner to see if you vibed or if you had, sexual chemistry. You visited a family home, almost always under the supervision of parents or chaperones, to determine if you were a suitable match for a lifelong union. For marriage.
Wow. So the end goal was crystal clear from the very first interaction. There was absolutely no "so what are we" conversation.
Exactly. The intent was transparent to everyone involved, including the entire community, and the single most important regulator in this entire system was reputation.
Reputation.
Specifically, a reputation for promise-keeping. Illouz makes this brilliant point that marriage markets have always existed, but in the 19th century, they were regulated by a very strict moral code. A man's reputation, his social capital, depended entirely on his ability to keep a promise.
So if a man courted a woman publicly, if he danced with her at all the balls, visited her parlor every Sunday, he wasn't just making a promise to her. He was making an implicit promise to the whole community.
Yes, a public declaration of intent. And if he broke that promise without a solid, objective, publicly acceptable reason like, say, discovering she had no dowry or that her family had a hidden scandal, he was socially ruined.
He couldn't just say, you know what, I'm just not feeling the spark anymore.
No way, or I think I need to focus on my career right now. That wasn't a valid reason to break a public promise. That would make him a cad, a scoundrel, untrustworthy.
That is just, it's wild to think about. Imagine if you couldn't break up with someone just because you lost interest.
It absolutely limited freedom, no question. But think about what it also limited: uncertainty. You didn't have to guess where you stood. The rules were public and they were clear.
And another key difference, you mentioned it before, was the ecology of choice.
Right. You didn't choose from the whole world or even the whole country. You chose from your social class, your village, and your family's network.
Your pool was tiny.
Very small. You might meet, 20 or 30 eligible people in your entire lifetime if you were lucky, and that meant you weren't constantly tormented by the idea that there was someone better out there.
You just chose the best available option from a very limited set.
You did. You weren't paralyzed by the what-ifs that plague us today.
And this leads directly to how they handled heartbreak. Illouz uses Wuthering Heights as a prime example, right? The story of Catherine and Heathcliff.
Yes, it's the quintessential 19th century romantic tragedy. Catherine loves Heathcliff with his all-consuming soul-deep passion, but she marries Edgar Linton.
Because Heathcliff has no status. He's poor, he's an orphan, he's seen as wild and uncivilized. The barrier is class. It's an external barrier.
It's entirely external. So when Heathcliff is effectively rejected by Catherine's choice, he doesn't sit around thinking, Catherine doesn't like my personality.
He doesn't think, I'm unlovable, or I must have an avoidant attachment style.
Exactly. He thinks the world is unjust. He thinks this social structure is cruel and arbitrary. The blame is completely externalized. It's a clash between his powerful, authentic passion and the rigid rules of society.
So it's tragic, and they suffer immensely. I mean, people in these books are always dying of brain fever or a broken heart, but the rejection doesn't destroy his fundamental self-worth in the same way modern rejection does.
That is such a key distinction. You've hit it right there. External blame versus internal blame. Heathcliff knows he's a valid person. He's just poor. He doesn't question his soul. He questions the society that won't let him have the thing he wants.
The suffering was about the impossibility of love in that context, not the insufficiency of the self.
Precisely.
So how on earth did we get from there to here? How did we go from, I can't marry you because of your social class, to, I can't be with you because, I don't know, I'm just not feeling it?
Well, we went through what Illouz calls the Great Transformation. She's borrowing this term from the economic historian Karl Polanyi.
Right. He was talking about markets.
Exactly. Polanyi's whole thing was about how the economic market was disembedded from social control in the 19th century. Before that, economic exchange was controlled by the village, the guild, the church. There were rules about just prices and usury. Then capitalism broke it free, and it became this wild, self-regulating beast.
And Illouz is saying the exact same thing happened to love.
The exact same thing. Love was disembedded from moral and social control. Parents, priests, and nosy village neighbors stopped regulating who we married. The old calling script where a man visited a woman's home died out.
The invention of the car was a big part of that, right? Suddenly you could leave the front porch.
A huge part. It created a private space for young people.
So if the old regulators disappeared, who took over? Because systems, they always have regulators. If it's not the priest anymore, who is it?
Two powerful new regulators stepped in: the market and the self.
Okay, let's talk about the market first. This is where Illouz introduces the concept of sexual fields. This is a fascinating, if slightly depressing concept.
It is. She's drawing on the work of the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu here. The idea is that it's not just a simple marketplace, it's a competitive field, like a sports field. There are players, there are rules, and there are different forms of capital.
In the old days, you traded status for status, like a good family name for a large dowry, land for a political connection.
Correct. But now, in the modern sexual field, the primary currency you trade is what Illouz calls erotic capital.
Erotic capital. That sounds incredibly transactional.
It is deeply transactional. Erotic capital refers to a combination of beauty, sexiness, charm, social skills, physical fitness,
Yeah.
everything that makes you desirable in this new context.
And the emphasis shifted.
Massively. In the past, character was paramount. Is he honest? Is she pious? Does he work hard? Is she a good homemaker? Now, sex appeal is a dominant form of currency. You can be a terrible person, morally bankrupt, but if you have high erotic capital, you have high status in the sexual field.
We see this in pop culture constantly. I mean, it's the entire premise of almost every reality dating show.
The Bachelor is the ultimate perfect example. It is a literal competition where women are explicitly ranked and eliminated week by week based on their perceived desirability to one man. It treats love as a spectator sport.
And what about something like Sex and the City? Illouz talks about that a lot.
Yes, she analyzes it deeply. She argues that it perfectly illustrates how love becomes like a shopping spree. The characters are constantly searching for the perfect fit, the right brand, the emotional accessory that matches their urban, sophisticated lifestyle.
It creates this pervasive idea that a partner is something you acquire to enhance your own life, rather than someone you build a life with.
Exactly. And because it's a market, it's subject to the cold, hard logic of supply and demand. And this is where the deregulation of love becomes so painful for so many people. We have, or we perceive that we have, unlimited choice.
And we're told this is the ultimate freedom. This is progress. This is the best time in history to be alive and dating.
But Illouz says this freedom is, in fact, a crushing burden.
It's the burden of freedom. This is the second major pillar of her argument, right?
It is. Modernity prizes freedom of choice above almost all else. We're conditioned to believe that more choice equals more happiness. But the paradox of choice is that it creates overwhelming anxiety. When you can choose anyone from a global pool of partners, how do you ever know you've chosen the right one?
I feel this constantly. It's that nagging fear that I'm settling, the fear that there's an optimal partner out there that I'm missing out on, and if I just keep looking, I'll find them.
And that is rationalization creeping into our love lives. We have started using consumer strategies to choose partners. We try to maximize utility. We comparison shop. We live in constant fear of buyer's remorse.
It's true. If you buy a new car, you spend weeks researching it, you test drive it, you compare it to 5 other models online. We now do that with human beings. We're terrified of making a suboptimal choice.
And this brings us right to the dreaded topic of commitment phobia.
Ah, yes. The great plague of modern dating. It's a huge buzzword. And usually we think of commitment phobes as, psychologically broken people. We pathologize them.
The go-to explanation is, oh, men who won't commit have mommy issues.
Or he's just emotionally unavailable. Or, the current favorite, he's a narcissist.
Illouz challenges this psychological framing entirely. She makes the provocative argument that commitment phobia is often a completely rational strategy in a market of perceived abundance.
Calling it rational feels so cold. How can ghosting someone or stringing them along for months be rational?
We have to separate the word rational from the word moral. It isn't kind, it isn't ethical, but it often follows the internal logic of the system. To understand why, we have to look at the structure of the market, specifically the differential position of men and women in it.
Okay, break that down.
In the sexual field, men often have a longer shelf life, so to speak.
You mean in terms of age and perceived desirability?
Yes. A man's market value doesn't tend to drop as steeply with age as a woman's does, culturally speaking. A 40-year-old bachelor is often seen as a catch, a silver fox. A 40-year-old single woman is often stigmatized with words like spinster.
It's a deeply unfair double standard, but it is a very real market force.
It's a real force. And men are also culturally conditioned to prioritize things like sexual variety and autonomy. So you put it all together in a market where they have abundant choice and a longer timeline to make a choice. What gives them the most leverage?
Not committing.
Exactly. The ability to withhold commitment creates scarcity and increases their value. If a man is elusive, if he's hard to pin down, he becomes the prize. By contrast, if a woman is seen as too available, or if she demands commitment too early, her value, according to this cold, brutal market logic, goes down. She's seen as needy.
So the guy who never texts back right away, or who says, let's just see where this goes for 6 months straight, he isn't necessarily terrified of intimacy. He's just maximizing his market value. He's playing the game.
He is leveraging his structural position. Illouz calls it strategic leverage. It isn't personal, it's structural. He's playing the game according to the incentives the market has set up for him. And this leads to a condition that Illouz gives a fantastic name to, abulia.
Abulia, I love that word.
It's an old 19th century psychiatric term. It means paralysis of will.
A paralysis of will.
It's not that people don't want to love. I think that's a mistake we often make. It's that the sheer overwhelming abundance of choice dampens the will to actually choose.
Because choosing means losing all the other options.
Yeah. Yes. Why settle for this person who has flaws, who maybe chews too loudly or has a weird laugh or doesn't share your exact political views when there might be someone perfect just one click away? The will to commit requires closing the door on all other options. In a market of infinite options, closing that door feels like a massive loss.
It feels like you're settling. And nobody wants to be the person who's settled. We're all taught to strive for the best.
And this creates a fundamental structural conflict. Illouz calls it the asymmetry of desire for a variety of reasons, partly biological clocks, partly cultural conditioning that still tells women your value is in being in a relationship. Women often want commitment sooner.
While men often want to prolong the search phase to keep your options open for as long as possible.
Exactly. So it's a structural conflict. It is not just a simple communication breakdown.
That's so important. It's a clash of timelines and market incentives.
And we are desperately trying to use the tools of therapy. We just need to learn to communicate our needs better, to fix what is essentially a market imbalance. You cannot communicate your way out of a structural asymmetry.
This makes so much sense. It takes the villainy out of it. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it explains the mechanics in a way that feels less personal, less like a judgment.
Well, speaking of the pain, let's talk about why it hurts so damn much. This is section 3, the crisis of recognition. Why does modern rejection feel like it completely shatters us?
This is the part of the book that it hit me the hardest. Because obviously rejection has always existed. People have been getting dumped for thousands of years. But Illouz argues that we've moved from pre-modern worth to modern worth, and that has fundamentally changed the nature of the pain.
Yes. In pre-modern times, as we discussed, your worth was more or less fixed. You knew who you were because society told you. You had a defined place in the hierarchy.
You were a peasant, a lord, a mother, a blacksmith, a member of the church.
Your identity was, to use the philosophical term, ontologically secure.
Meaning your fundamental existence and value weren't really up for debate.
Right. You didn't need your spouse to tell you that you were a valid human being. Your validity came from God, from the king, from your labor, from your community role. But today, most of us are ontologically insecure. We are free-floating individuals. We don't have those fixed roles anymore. So the terrifying question becomes, how do we know we matter?
We need other people to tell us. We need them to see us.
We need recognition. And because the great organizing forces of religion and tight-knit community have faded for many, we have placed an immense burden on one specific person, the romantic partner. The romantic partner has, in many ways, replaced the priest.
We need the gaze of the lover to witness our lives and make us feel real.
Yes. The central question of existence has shifted from, do I exist in the eyes of God, to, does anybody love me?
And so if nobody loves me,
then you feel like you don't really exist, or at least that you have no social value. This is why Illouz calls modern rejection social annihilation.
It's not just I lost a boyfriend. It's I am fundamentally worthless.
It is a total collapse of the self. Illouz tells that story, I'm sure you remember it, about the woman whose friends try to comfort her by telling her she's awesome after a breakup.
Yes, the awesome friend. A woman is completely crushed, she's a wreck, and her friends surround her and say, but you're so awesome, you're so smart, you're pretty, you're funny. He's a complete idiot for not seeing that.
And we've all done this. We've all been that friend. But stop and think about what that ritual actually implies. The friends are trying to rebuild her worth. They aren't just saying, I'm sorry you're sad. They are literally listing her market assets.
Her resume for the sexual field.
Precisely. They are trying to prove that she still has value in the sexual field. The crisis isn't just about the loss of the guy. It's about the devastating verdict on her worth.
It's the fear of being invisible.
Yes. If you aren't desired in the sexual field, do you have social value? In a society that relentlessly equates sexiness and desirability with status, the answer feels like a terrifying no. And this is why the pain is so sharp, so existential. It attacks the very core of your identity.
And this brings us to that piece of advice that everyone gives. I see it on Instagram graphics every single day. You have to love yourself first.
Oh, Illouz despises this advice. She critiques it so heavily and so brilliantly.
Why? On the surface, it sounds so empowering. You can't expect anyone else to love you until you love yourself.
She argues that this is, sociologically speaking, impossible. Recognition must come from outside the self. We are social animals. We are constituted by the gaze of others. Her analogy is perfect. You cannot tickle yourself.
No, that's good.
You cannot validate your own social worth in total isolation. Our sense of self is built through our interactions with the world by seeing ourselves reflected in the eyes of others.
That is actually such a relief to hear
Yeah.
because you really try to love yourself, but you're sitting alone in your apartment on a Friday night and it just doesn't feel like enough.
Because it isn't enough. And telling people to just love themselves is a cruel way of privatizing a social problem. It says if you're lonely and in pain, it's your fault. It's because you haven't done enough inner work. It's a form of victim blaming.
It completely ignores the structural reality that we need external validation to feel whole.
It says you are suffering because of the ruthless logic of the market, but we are going to diagnose it as your lack of self-esteem. It's a sleight of hand that keeps the system itself from ever being questioned.
Okay, so we're in a tough spot. We have this insecure self. We have this ruthless market. How do we even try to navigate it? This brings us to section 4, the rationalization of intimacy. We try to use tools to fix the problem.
We try to control chaos, we try to make love a science, and we do this in two main ways, through therapy and through technology. First, let's talk about the therapeutic narrative.
We turn everyone and every interaction into a diagnosis.
We do. We analyze love through a psychological lens, the Oedipus complex, attachment theory, childhood trauma. Or we try to explain it away with biology. It's all hormones, pheromones, evolutionary programming. Oh, I'm just waiting for the dopamine hit to wear off.
What's the effect of thinking about love that way?
It strips love of its magic, its mystery, its sacredness, in a way. It turns love into a problem to be solved or a project to be optimized. It becomes a technical skill.
Like if I just communicate using I feel statements, and if I understand my attachment style, I can hack the relationship into success.
Exactly. It creates an intellectual distance between us and the raw emotion itself.
And there is nothing that makes it more of a technical skill than internet dating.
Internet dating is the ultimate and most powerful force for the rationalization of love. Illouz talks about the visualization of the market.
Meaning for the first time in history, you can literally see the market.
Yes. In the 19th century village, you knew maybe 20 eligible people. You couldn't see all the other eligible people in the world. On a dating app, you can scroll through 5,000 potential partners in a single hour. You can see the seemingly infinite supply.
And this creates what she calls the buffet effect.
The buffet effect. People become interchangeable goods. When you're standing at a buffet with 100 different dishes, how do you choose? You become incredibly picky. You compare everything. This shrimp looks slightly bigger than that shrimp.
It forces us to compare people on a list of specific attributes: height, income, hobbies, political affiliation, hair color.
It's the checklist. Must be over 6 feet tall, must love dogs, must have a graduate degree, must not be a smoker.
And this leads directly to maximization. We are trained by our consumer culture to always look for the best deal. So we stop looking for good enough, which was the implicit goal of the 19th century, and we start a relentless search for perfect compatibility.
And this creates a profound cognitive shift. We move away from intuition, that gut feeling, that spark, that inexplicable chemistry, and we move towards assessment. We become auditors of other people's souls.
We do. We audit the date.
The interview date.
Ugh. I've been on so many of these. You sit down, you order a drink, and you basically just exchange resumes. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you want kids? What are your non-negotiables?
And it absolutely kills the spontaneity. It murders the epiphany of falling in love. You can't fall in love with a resume. You fall in love with a person with all their quirks and flaws. But the technology forces us to interact with a resume first. We are evaluating and disqualifying people before we even meet them.
So we're overthinking, overanalyzing, and maximizing. And because the stakes are so incredibly high, because rejection means total worthlessness, we have developed a powerful defense mechanism. Which brings us to section 5, irony, ambivalence, and the cool self.
This is the emotional armor of the modern dater. Because the market is so volatile and because we feel so easily replaceable, we protect ourselves with a thick layer of irony.
I don't really care. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just going with the flow.
Cool ambivalence. We pretend we don't care. We keep things deliberately casual. I'm not looking for anything serious right now. Let's just see where it goes. We are terrified of showing that we care because that would be showing weakness.
It's a power move. Everyone knows the person who cares less has all the power.
Exactly. The sociologist Willard Waller called this the principle of least interest way back in the 1930s. The person least interested in continuing the relationship holds the most power. But Illouz argues that this pervasive coolness signals the death of passion.
Because true passion requires risk. It requires vulnerability.
Passion, by its very definition, requires you to be vulnerable. It requires risk. It requires the courage to say, I need you, and it would destroy me if I can't have you.
Like the character Werther in the 19th century novel, who literally kills himself over unrequited love. Or Romeo and Juliet. It's all or nothing.
Yes. But in the modern sexual field, admitting that kind of intense need is seen as, well, it's cringe. It's needy. It dramatically lowers your market value. If you text back too fast, you lose. If you admit you want a relationship on the first date, you lose.
So we adopt this cool, detached, ironic pose.
But the terrible cost is that we prevent ourselves from actually falling in love. We are so busy defending ourselves from potential pain that we can't form a genuine connection.
We are so busy protecting ourselves from rejection that we block the very connection we're so desperate for. It's a tragic, tragic irony.
And this extends to how we talk about relationships themselves. We treat the relationship as if it's a third entity in the room. We talk about the relationship.
We need to work on the relationship. Is this relationship healthy? Are my needs being met in this relationship?
We're constantly taking the temperature of the relationship, monitoring its vital signs instead of just living in it.
It's what Illouz calls emotional ontology. We are constantly monitoring and evaluating its state of being.
It prevents us from just being. It turns the relationship into another project to be managed and optimized, like your career or your diet or your workout routine. It adds this layer of exhausting reflexivity to everything.
So, this is bleak. This is all very bleak. Let me try to summarize. We're trapped in a high-stakes, competitive market, evaluating other human beings like their products, terrified of rejection because it threatens to destroy our entire self-worth, and so we hide behind a mask of irony that prevents us from ever truly connecting.
That is a pretty good summary. It is a system perfectly designed to produce anxiety, dissatisfaction, and loneliness.
So what does this all mean? How do we wrap our heads around this and, not just give up entirely? This brings us to the conclusion. The crisis in perception.
This is the most important part of the whole book, the title of our show, really. The crisis isn't just that love is hard. Love has always been hard in its own way. The crisis is that we perceive these massive structural problems as our own tiny personal failures.
We blame ourselves.
We blame ourselves. I'm too needy, I'm unlovable, or we blame our partners. He's a narcissist, she's emotionally unstable. We are misplacing the accountability.
When we should be blaming the deregulation of the marriage market and the commodification of intimacy, we should be blaming the system.
Exactly. When you understand that your pain is the predictable result of a great transformation in how our society is organized, it completely changes how you feel about that pain.
It's the value of the sociological view.
There.
It offers, first and foremost, relief.
It alleviates so much of the shame. You aren't failing at love because you are fundamentally broken. You are struggling to navigate a market that is designed to produce anxiety, inequality, and endless, unfulfilling searching.
It gives you clarity. You can finally see the invisible architecture that's been shaping your life.
And hopefully it gives you a little bit of agency back. You can't change the entire system alone. You can't single-handedly decide to go back to 1850, and nor would you want to with the lack of rights and sanitation. But you can stop beating yourself up for just trying to survive in it. You can stop taking the market verdict on your desirability as a final verdict on your soul.
That is huge. Just knowing that being ghosted is a predictable outcome of a system that prizes optionality, that it's a market inefficiency and not a final statement on my value as a human being, that actually helps. It really does.
It should. It allows you to step back and say, the system is crazy, rather than, I am crazy.
Before we go, I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought. We've talked a lot on this show about inequality in money, inequality in housing. But Illouz's work hints at something even darker, I think.
She does. If love now operates within a market, and markets by their very nature inevitably produce winners and losers, does this mean that a vast inequality of love is a permanent structural feature of modern life?
Can we ever reclaim the purity or the sanctity of love without sacrificing our cherished modern freedom? Or is the price of our freedom the cold acceptance that some people will simply be priced out of the market for love altogether?
It really raises the question, is love a fundamental human right, or has it become a luxury good? In the modern world, it's looking more and more like a luxury good, available only to those with the highest forms of capital.
Something to mull over while you're swiping tonight.
Indeed.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis and Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.